5 cards in 5 minutes? Let's go! I'll be making my 5 cards with this new Bouquet of Love stamp from Altenew, but you can get the look with what you have. Catherine's Climbing Flowers background stamp would work, or any large floral stamp, or you could even group smaller stamps together. Card 1. The most obvious way to use an outline background stamp like this one is to stamp it and color it in. Of course, there are endless choices for coloring, so be sure to use the correct ink for your selected medium. I'm going to watercolor, so I'm using waterproof ink and watercolor cardstock. Watercoloring is not the medium I feel the most comfortable with, but this method gives great, loose, dreamy results. I start by spritzing water all over my panel, then spreading it with a brush so I know the whole panel is coated. Then I drop in watery colors, just going over the whole image. This will give a base layer of pale color, and it'll spread out of the lines to give almost an aura around certain areas. I did the flowers and leaves first, and then I went back in and did the background with a mix of teal and gray for a soft look. I gave it another spritz of water and then tilted the board around to keep the color moving. I used my heat gun to dry it, and then I went back with a drier brush and deepened up some of the colors. This is a great time to add some shading and depth to the flowers to get a look of dimension. I added one of the sentiments from the set, and I used a white Posca pen to color in the little berries or dots. Card 2. The easiest way to use an outline background stamp is to stamp it in black and just leave it that way. But here's a way to not only take advantage of this easy technique and dramatic look, but also to do something a little different. I stamped it off the edge of one end of my cardstock, then I flipped the panel around in the MISTI and stamped it again on the other edge, leaving white space in the center for my sentiment. You can add color to the sentiment or go strictly black and white, as I did here. I added a few silver jewels for some neutral sparkle. Card 3. This is really just a variation of the technique I used on card 2. This time I've stamped one of the tips of the stamp along the edge of my panel before moving the panel along and stamping the other tip. Same technique, completely different look because it doesn't have those big flowers in the center. To add some color quickly, I blended blue ink for my sky using one of the large blender brushes. These brushes are fantastic for getting soft blending over large areas quickly. I just let it fade out as I got closer to the flowers, and then I blended green ink just at the bottom to add some color to the leaf area. Then I felt like the tulips also needed some color, so I grabbed one of the small blending tools and some yellow ink, and I just blended over the two flowers with a very tight circle motion and light pressure, building up the color until I was happy. This one had so much clear space, I needed a really large sentiment. So I grabbed my favorite thank you sentiment from Rennie Roses and I stamped it in all that blue sky using my MISTI. Card 4. This time, instead of just stamping the image, I'm heat embossing it. I'm turning it so it's perpendicular to the cardstock panel for yet another look. One of the benefits of this big stamp is that you can crop it down and feature certain areas in different cards to get different looks. I'm also stamping it onto a piece of cardstock I created with a rainbow of bright colored inks and my gel press, but you could stamp it onto solid cardstock or even patterned paper with a subtle pattern. This look is inspired by one of my favorite artists that I found on Instagram, Messy Ever After, so if you like this one, be sure to check her work out. With all that color, this card doesn't need much more. I created another negative space frame and I used one of the smaller sentiments embossed in white on black cardstock. Card 5. For this card, I'm combining a bunch of the previous techniques. First, I stamped it and turned it, but this time I don't want space in the center. I want the whole panel covered with the images, so I had to move the stamp to maximize coverage while minimizing overlap. I used Copic-friendly ink this time so I could color it with alcohol markers. I restamped with embossing ink and I heat embossed it with gold powder. Embossing gives this stamp a completely different, more elegant look, which is pretty as it is, but I had to go one step further. I covered the whole panel with embossing ink, and then I sprinkled sparkly embossing powder over top. You could use it just like this, but for my taste, it's a little busy. One way to use a busy pattern like this is to cut it down, so I used the lowercase bold alpha dies to cut my mom word. Since there was enough of the panel left, I also cut hello for a future project. I stacked the letters up with 3 layers of white die cuts and backed them onto a black strip for good visibility. If you don't have this stamp, here's a playlist that has a number of videos focused on my very own limes method for getting the look with what you have. It works with any inspiration and it helps you get amazing results. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.